Before we begin this mindfulness worksheet on noticing movement through the breath, let's just take a moment to check in. Check in with why it is that you chose this topic. And then make a little promise to yourself as we go through the worksheet that you'll be aware of and you'll notice how it is that you feel as we move through these exercises. How do you feel physically in your belly or chest or head, for example? Are there certain emotions that you relate with these visceral feelings, or are there certain emotions that arise? Be aware of any positive or negative reaction that you have to these stories, to these topics. And understand that there's many others who are feeling the same about this topic as you are. Understand too that however it is that you feel can possibly change over time, and that with increased awareness, you might feel differently as we move through the worksheet. And then finally, make a little commitment to apply whatever it is that you learn today, even if it's just one small, simple thing. Make a little commitment to apply that in your day-to-day life. So noticing movement through the breath. Energy is always in motion. It never completely stands still. Everything, even down to the tiniest little atoms that make up what we think is solid, are vibrating constantly in motion and moving, right? The nature of energy is to flow. And what happens is that we create our own pain and suffering by trying in several ways to stop or block this flow of energy. And we do this without even noticing, without even realizing. We do this mindlessly. We do it in one of two ways. First, we do it when we try to hold on to the energy in our lives that we enjoy, positive energy. We want it to stay just as it is and to never change. We want our relationships to stay the same forever. We want that person whom we like and who we love to stay the same. We want our new car to always be in a state of newness. We want our bodies to never age, right? But all of these things go against the true nature of energy, which is movement and flow and change. So when we're met with the inevitable, when the new car gets old, when the bodies age, when the person changes, we become surprised and upset. And then we also try to hold back and block energy when it comes to the things that we don't like, right? We try to suppress painful emotions. We're rude to those whom we don't care for. We avoid situations or encounters that might cause us uncomfortable feelings, such as nervousness or fear. And we even avoid those situations when they're necessary. And all of this eventually returns to harm us, right? Every time that we try to resist the natural flow of this movement of energy and the way things are, we create pain and suffering for ourselves and for others. And we do this even in meditation. If we have experience with meditation, we've probably had experience with the frustration that's caused as we try to hold back energy or hold good energy in place, right? There's a very common misconception about meditation that in meditation, someday we will arrive at this place where we can stop our thoughts, right? Where we just don't think and we rest somehow in this zombie-like state of bliss and contentment, right? But that's just not the case. The mind is always moving, just like the energy around us. The mind has an energy of its own that's continually at play, right? And we can learn to be present with that energy and allow for that movement of energy without chasing and grabbing on and holding on to the positive energy and equally without fighting against or pushing away or trying to suppress the negative energy. So we will finally feel free when we finally stop resisting the true nature of energy, right? When we finally accept that energy is in motion and we can flow along with us, along with it. So one very good way to remember and to be reminded that energy is always in motion and always in flux is by watching and noticing the energy of the breath. The breath is always with us, and the breath is always moving. And by connecting to breath, we can connect to the true nature of how energy operates in our lives, right? Things arise, they stay for a while, and then they dissipate again. And so we can use the breath as a teacher. So we're going to begin with a meditation here that helps explore awareness of movement through awareness of the breath. And this is a very simple meditation, so you can always do this one again on your own just by setting a timer for 5, 10, 15 minutes. This time we'll just follow along here for a quick version. So find a comfortable seat that allows for an upright spine and an open chest. Roll your shoulders down and back. Settle into your hips. And close your eyes or gaze low and soft towards the earth ahead of you to turn your attention inward. Breathe slowly and quietly in and out through your nose. And notice your breath. And can you notice the breath not through the thinking mind, but through the body itself? Feel into felt sensation of breath. Experience how the body breathes itself. How the breath moves the body. Perhaps feeling into the slight upward lift or opening of the chest that accompanies each breath in, and the release or the softening that accompanies each breath out. And as you connect to breath and felt sensation of breath, recognize how every moment of the breathing and in every moment your body is always in movement, always changing. And the mind too is always moving. The mind is moving even as it's aware of the body and breath and staying present. And sometimes we'll notice that the mind has moved far away. And if that's the case, we just return to this present moment by returning to breath awareness and returning to that felt sensation of breath through the body itself. So the goal here is not to try to stop the movement of the mind, not to hold or push anything back, nor is it to stay completely static or completely still with breath, with the body. Both of those things are impossible. The mind is always moving, even when the mind is focused. So instead, we give spaciousness to that movement. We allow for it, and we can allow for movement of the mind without chasing movement of the mind. We're present with breath, present with felt sensation of breath in the body. And if we do notice the mind is desiring to go elsewhere where it already has, we just come back to breath, come back to body. Nothing to fight against, nothing to hold back or suppress. Just flow on back to presence with body and breath. And we practice that as many times as we need to, returning to the breath perhaps a little sooner, a little quicker every time. Recognizing that movement is the true nature of energy, that your breath is energy, and so too is your mind, and all those things are moving. And we can work with it, to hold ourselves relatively still. Still and present with the breath and with felt sensation of breath. And then we'll slowly open our eyes and come back to some questions on what it is that we noticed. So feel free to pause the video anytime that you need to spend a little more time writing. Spend as much time with each of these questions as you'd like. But first, we'll begin by describing your general experience with the meditation. Very general. And as you drew your attention to the breath and the movement of breath, where in your body did you notice the breath most vividly, most clearly? And maybe it's the body in general or in one specific place. And then in general, can you describe what the difference would be between thinking about the breath versus feeling the breath? Did you find it challenging to stay present with breath awareness? And do you think it's possible to recognize that your mind is active, recognize that movement of the mind, and yet not chase the movement of the mind? Do you think it's possible to see that you've become distracted and yet not chase that distraction, or just rather notice that distraction is present, the tendency is there? And do you think that over time, you could learn to return to the breath more quickly once it is that you've noticed that you have chased distraction? So the truth is, in meditation, although we talk about stillness, we become relatively still, but never completely still. So why is that? And perhaps jotting down a few notes about this idea of relative stillness versus complete static stillness. And did you notice in your meditation if there were any ways in which you were trying to stop movement and to hold energy still because that energy felt good, right? What points in the meditation were you grasping and trying to hold in place good sensation, positive feelings? And in what ways did you find yourself trying to stop movement or hold things back or push against or suppress because of something you didn't like or because of something you felt was, wrong with the meditation or out of place? And what do you think it would look like or feel like to be still and quiet despite movement in your mind, right? Understanding, if we understand there's always movement within our mind, what then does it look like to be quiet or still or to have a quote unquote perfect meditation? And do you think that this exercise might change your relationship to your own mind and your own thoughts outside of meditation? And if so, how might that manifest? And how might you benefit from a greater acceptance of movement and change, right? From really making friends with the idea that everything is in flux, everything is in changing, and everything is moving all the time. So, as a review, every single thing that seems stable and solid is always in motion. Right? Remember that even if we were to zero in on the furniture in our homes, we would see that there's movement at the molecular level. And if we could dial down even further, right? There's movement ever present in everything, even things that seem completely solid and fixed and stable and still, right? The oldest trees in our yard are still growing and changing. Our cars and computers and devices are all in this process of getting older, and they will eventually break down. And our pain arises because we forget. We forget that this movement of energy is the true nature of how things really are. Things are always in motion. Energy just doesn't stand still, right? And so we suffer when we expect things to remain one way forever and then they don't. The breath can teach us to accept. The breath gives us this constant reminder that things are always in movement. And the breath is a wonderful reminder because it's always with us, right? Ever present. The breath reminds us that everything is in flux and everything is in this continual, constant process of change. So, by embracing this continual movement, by deepening an awareness of breath that is present with us in every single moment, by becoming more mindful of breath, we also become more accepting of the change that we see all around us, right? If we can become more mindful of breath, and in that process become more mindful that the true nature of ourselves and the world around us is movement, is flow, is changing energy, we ultimately become more peaceful and become more at ease because when we accept, we flow with versus fighting against, right? When we accept, we flow with versus fighting against.